the principles matter to the team because they are our promise of the kind of work environment that we want to create.
How do we run a business in a playground?
You can't explain a playground. I mean, you can, but that won't make the person actually understand. They have to be in the playground for a while before they actually believe that they're in a playground. Maturity is not the loss of the inner child and its
Hmm.
replacement by a formatted person in a gray suit or whatever. It's the ability to choose when to be which one. I fundamentally believe that's part of the experiment, is that if you give that type of agency and investment and autonomy to people, it will pay dividends more than if you try and control them.
Hmm.
People choose to work for us because they've got the feeling, this is a cool place to work, like a
Hmm.
nice place to work. I can feel like I can
Hmm.
be myself and I can do what I want to do.
So, hi, my name is Isabeau, and I work at IQM, and I'm joined today by my boss, Thibaut, who's the head of strategy. We jump into our third PVT about strategy so that I and anyone watching can get a better understanding of how we work as a business. Um,
Nice.
we've been talking a lot about aspirational sides of our strategy and the kind of big picture. I thought we could take this time to dive a bit deeper into that and also speak on more practical ways we're using it.
So I think in our little chat just before starting the recording, you were saying that it was still not entirely clear to you how some of those more high level or aspirational points actually get applied on a day to day. And I think one of the things that we want to figure out, and one of the reasons why we're recording this, is how do we make those more aspirational, more philosophical points come alive for the rest of the team. Um, and what I'd like to dig a little bit deeper into is how practical and how visible do we need to make it? I think one of the things that we talked about last time or the time before was that for me, these principles are ultimately behind every decision I make
Mhm.
in the business, right? And every decision that Stuart makes. Ultimately, if you take any prioritization discussion and you unpack it, it should always lead to, well, it's because we're adhering to these principles. And so I think if one of the barriers to understanding and seeing those principles and the vision at IQM is that reasoning is not made visible enough, then I want to understand how practical, how much does it need to get broken down before it becomes visible? What level of operational application would you like to see, or do you need to see them in action or believe them in action, if that makes sense?
I know I think of how we have a very quick sum up of four different points of what it looks like to be a successful member at IQM. I'm thinking more on how would be able to showcase it that quickly, where I easily can bring up any of those points right now and say, here's how you be a great employee. Here's the things that you need so that we can communicate well, we can understand one another and work well. That would be really helpful for me to be able to see the strategy in the same way, where anyone in the company, and myself included, could be an advocate for it. Right now, it is more needing to discuss with you so that we can understand it.
Okay. So in the past, we have done that. We have broken down the principles that Stuart and I use in our decision making and crystallize them out with the team. The result is that year or two after that exercise, nobody remembers. So
Mhm.
just the exercise of putting that on a piece of paper, to me, that doesn't work. Maybe the good at IQM, so very clear communication, own your domain, improve what's around you, and accept others as they are. The fact that we've mapped that out, but also that I repeat that in at least every grow makes it more alive for people because it's part of something that they care about, which is their personal development and their progression in the organization. Tell me what you think in terms of how do we make it come alive? How do we make it actually part of the way we work?
I think part of that would also be the ownership we're asking everyone to play into the strategy, because that then also lets us know how important it is for them to understand. And maybe there is different levels to that. Maybe the average member at IQM doesn't need to understand the company's strategy. Following the good at IQM is enough for them to do their work. But maybe for those who are taking on more of a manager role or starting to make decisions more on strategy, that's when it then matters for them to be brought into
Yeah.
This kind of like a level of understanding of, hey, here's how we use money. Here's why we do what we do. I don't think it matters to everybody. And it won't matter to every person in the business unless you're wanting it to.
Yeah, part of our success when recruiting people is due to the culture aspect, right? People don't choose to work for us because we pay super well. People don't choose to work for us because we've got a super sexy product that will look good on their CV, or because we've got an amazing brand that they will love to have on their CV. People choose to work for us because they've got the feeling, this is a cool place to work, like a nice place to work. I can feel like I can be myself and I can do what I want to do. And, I have my little blurb of how I present the company and what our priorities are and why that means that potentially you'll earn a bit less, but hopefully we'll have a safer, nicer environment to work in. So it's there. And I think it's important for everyone. The question is, how explicit does it need to be repeated? And what you say is absolutely true. So when we're saying you reach that certain level of responsibility where you need to have some kind of cross-domain autonomy, then you need to understand those values, those principles, and apply them to a certain level, because you're going to start making those kind of decisions. And so there absolutely needs to be more explicit. But I feel like the way we run the business is already something that is implicitly known by the team, but there's uncertainty because people apply their own assumptions, and means that some things will not be recognized, other things will disproportionately be recognized, and that kind of stuff.
It's sounding to me like the most important side for people to understand is the people side, if that's the part that is the reason people choose to work here. And if most of the reasons why we're making the decisions we're making is for the betterment of the people who are working here, then I would say that that's then the people side is the side that we need to continue to show a focus on.
Here's where I think this can be of value to the team. So we have these principles or these values by which we want to run the business. And to a certain extent, they are our promise to the team, because our values and principles are very, very much internally oriented. It's not like we have a brand promise to the outside world where we say we're going to deliver this to you. That it's kind of secondary to what we're trying to achieve internally. And so it's our promise to the team. And I think you mentioned it in, maybe it was the first chat we had, of this also being a way for the team to hold us accountable. Whether we are actually making those decisions that are in line with those principles and values. We say we are, right? We say that we do that, but ultimately there's little to no accountability. Stuart and I have chats about that kind of stuff, but the team doesn't know about that. The principles matter to the team because they are our promise of the kind of work environment that we want to create. They are then starting to apply those themselves once they take up a certain level of responsibility. And then when you get to that level of responsibility in the business, where we assume that good at IQM and that kind of stuff is all at least good enough, then the team or the group holds you accountable to those values again. And so when you get to the final responsibility in the business, like with Stuart and me, then actually what we get evaluated on in our grow is not whether our communication is great. Yes, it absolutely should be, right? But most of those points should be more on how we are held accountable to those principles, whether we are actually prioritizing the things that we said we would, or are we getting distracted, sidetracked?
Yeah, that would make sense. I think along with accountability, informing that to the team also helps them understand what to hold you accountable to, because as we have spoken of before, there's hundreds of things you could be saying are not perfect or could be improved or could be changed. And so are the things we should be holding accountable for is that our product can be improved, or that someone's not happy with the way that it is working because it conflicts with our people principles. What are the things you're wanting to be held accountable to? Because maybe that will help us also flesh out what are the practical things that our strategy means to the business.
The things that we've spoken most about in the last sessions are the more exported goal of what we're trying to create, right? We're trying to create an environment in which we can all experiment with alternative ways of organizing groups of humans. And if we can demonstrate that to a certain scale and in a certain environment, a certain type of organization works equally well or better on the traditional metrics. So in a capitalist system, profit is a metric, but then we gain on the human side, for instance, having that live lab, if you will. That's one thing. But then the other thing that we started talking about last time was that it's not change for the sake of change. We are experimenting to optimize certain other metrics that the capitalist system that we live in doesn't optimize by its nature. Capitalism wants to optimize profit, even if it goes at the expense of well-being. Whereas what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a system that optimizes different metrics while maintaining profit at a level that is sufficient to survive in a capitalist society, right? We're creating this bubble, this denial bubble within the society that we have to live in, because very hard with a small group of people to completely change a whole country's infrastructure. The things that we want to hold ourselves accountable to are, one, this ability to experiment and learn from how we run things. That's like the condition without which it doesn't work. Other values, which we are trying to optimize, one of them is to have fun. We want to, at least to a certain extent, enjoy the time we spend at work. The second one is we want to learn, and that is both learn as an organization, so that's the point that we've already mentioned, but also learn as individuals and spread that information. So maybe there's a different way of phrasing that, right? Because the way that we've phrased that before was to widen people's perspectives, and that includes ourselves. We want to keep exposing ourselves to new things. We want to keep learning new things and learn about new things. And when we have learned those new things, is to bring them to other people so that they can profit from them as well. They can benefit from them as well. And so the fun part is equally, we want to do that internally, but we also want to export that. Ideally, we want to make the interactions with the people around us more fun, whether that's our clients or partners and that kind of stuff. And that's why I tend to be very harsh with especially suppliers and partners who do something to me that I would never do to a friend. That relationship has now fully been reduced to just transactional, and I don't want to invest any more into it. I'm not going to play nice if you're going to screw me over as soon as I've got my back turned. That's not how it works. You wouldn't do that to a friend. You wouldn't do that to a human. You do that to an organization because you pretend like organizations are abstract things without feelings, whether they're actually groups of humans. And so if that's the relationship that you want, then I'm going to minimize the amount of energy that I invest in that. Absolutely. The third one that we previously raised was to raise the playing field for everyone. So that means that we want equal opportunities for everyone by default. And then once everybody's got those equal opportunities, we want to bring what that opportunity looks like up. So that translates very directly into how we do the compensation system, where we've got that foundation and then the compensation matrix on top of that. Most of the time when we're talking about how we increase the compensation, we probably want to increase the foundation, because we don't want there to be that big of a delta between the lowest paid job and the highest paid job. Ideally, we want everybody to live a comfortable life, and then there to be a little bit of an incentive, because we know humans are competitive, right? And so there needs to be a little bit of an incentive. I don't believe in a fully communist society, because people are competitive, and that is one of the main motivators. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a very good starting point. You don't need to put people in the gutter to have people be very well off.
What you've been talking about is reminding me of the playground. Like, in a good sense, what you're saying about the ability to experiment, have fun, the ability to learn, to collaborate and treat people well. How much are we acting in this way versus someone's coming in from a corporate job, and how do they understand how to play and how to interact in this way? How do we teach someone to go into a playground again where they can do those things and take off their corporate suit or whatever. How do we win people over in that way? Or how do we convince people it's okay to do those things?
Yeah, I think that fits very well. And you've got multiple ways of dealing with a new kid because you'll get every flavor of new kid. You'll get the very shy kid that just sits in the corner and needs to first be given a bit of time to acclimatize to the new environment and then get encouragement to come out of their shell. Then you've got the really social kid that has no problem at all integrating and just like a fish in the water. And then you've got the new kid that reacts with aggression and tries to test the boundaries of this new freedom of be like, oh, can I abuse this? How you react to that. Do you respond to it in a constructive way or do you respond to it by crying out for the parent? And if you cry out for the parent, it undermines the trust of the other kids in the integrity of the playground. Because if you need external intervention for it to work, then it actually doesn't work. And yeah, so absolutely. I think that that works very well as an analogy because I think there's lots of stuff that we did much better as kids and we've been trained out of, sadly. And so maybe we should learn to tap back into them a little bit. In the reflection on what does it practically look like to apply some of those principles of we want to be different, right? What does that mean? How do we apply it? How do we apply it on a day-to-day? What does that mean for somebody who wants to step up in the organization? Because it's very strange. If I'm telling you, well, if you want to take more responsibility on the process side or on the admin side of the business, well, first of all, I need you to have a certain mastery of some of those domains in the business. Then I need you to demonstrate an ability to understand complex problems and explain them to me. But also I want you to demonstrate that you're prioritizing fun over money, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very different path to what you would see in a normal corporate environment.
Yeah. Also, I'm thinking of there are probably many people who can do the ability to experiment and learn, ability to have fun and meet all those things, but they're not looking to understand the strategy higher. They're not looking to expand, but there are people that are. I think that maybe that is the part in which it gets confusing. How do we run a business in a playground? How do we work with and help people who are new to the business coming in who are only looking at the business and less of the playground? How do they feel comfortable in that environment? When I'm thinking of the sand of a playground, there is a lot less certainty and stability in that.
I think there's a few things there. Let's start with the end. I think you can't explain a playground. I mean, you can, but that won't make the person actually understand. But they have to be in the playground for a certain while before they actually believe that they're in a playground. And, you know, depending on how much time they spent and how poor their experiences were before coming into the playground, they might lose trust in the playground very quickly again and then have to go through that whole process again. And so this is kind of what I'm trying to get at, is that explaining it isn't what's actually going to have people integrate these things into how they do their job. It's making sure that we integrate these things into the process in a way that's explicit enough, but that's actually something you do and not something you hear, so that people then start applying it. That goes for new people, but then coming back to your point of, well, some people might not want to go to that level of abstraction. That might be true if you stay at a relatively low level of independence, and certain people will. But I think it's also important to make the distinction that at least the intention of how we've set up the compensation matrix is that higher levels of independence and higher levels of decision making do not necessarily correspond to people management, which is the way that traditionally progression looks in a business. The integration of these principles into people's decision making is important even when they want to just become a more senior dev, where ideally we put them in a black box and they don't ever speak to anyone and they just bash away at keyboards. If you get to a certain level of independence within a product, within the development of a product, and you need to start making architectural decisions, etc., then you need to start looking at domains that go outside of bashing a keyboard. And as soon as you do that, then you start interacting with some of those principles that we've talked about, where we want you to elevate other people with the knowledge that you have so that they can become better developers, and to maintain some fun in the way that you do work, maybe even in the way that you code and in the way that we put out products, ideally. I would like to get to a point where everybody understands these principles and is able to apply them within their domain, no matter how small or how big that domain is, in the same way that we require everybody to apply IQM good in their work, no matter how big or small their domain. And of course, it's more visible and impactful in decisions that are made at a critical or a final decision level. But I think it is still relevant at every level of the organization.
I think the side that we haven't spoken much on, and this kind of also breaks in some ways my analogy of a playground, is that we're not on a playground because we also have customers. We have something we're also trying to make to give out to the world or to make a profit. Because like I'm understanding the ability to experiment and learn, to have fun, to learn both organizational and individual, raise the playing field and also raise opportunities. But how do we marry that also with the need to make money and also to develop a quality product and have customers want to work with us? Understanding the prioritization of those, I think at times is where I personally can find it hard to understand, because sometimes we do need to do a bit better at being just a company, and sometimes we need to do a bit better just being in the playground. And how do we keep that with also knowing that we're trying to produce a product out of this experience as well?
Yeah, I think that's where the playground analogy still holds up, but we're not kids. For me, maturity is not the loss of the inner child and its replacement by a formatted person in a gray suit or whatever. It's the ability to choose when to be which one.
That's true.
I believe that if we create a playground, then we are going to be able to deliver the work that a normal organization or a traditional organization does in a fraction of the time. One, because people are going to have more energy, more satisfaction, are going to be more situated in a position that they like, that they're good at. The individuals in the organization, I believe, are going to be more productive because the support structure around them is more ideal. I'm sure that you've seen it in other organizations where if people are done with their work by 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. and they have to sit there until 5 p.m., they're not going to start work on other stuff because they don't care. If you're in an organization where you care about the success of the organization and where you care about the outcome, people are going to, in general, be more proactive, be more independent, and so produce more output. And it might be that ultimately the amount of time that we spend producing normal output is the same as a normal organization, except that in a traditional organization, people would be waiting for the day to end. We do fun stuff. That's kind of the idea. The amount of traditional productive hours is similar, but we do fun stuff on purpose and they do fun stuff despite what top management and middle management would like them to do and puts micromanagement practice in place. And hopefully we can also reduce some of the bureaucracy, etc., around running a business, because there's more trust and there's more independence. And so you can actually focus more time on doing the stuff that matters, whether it matters to you or to a client. That's then a different discussion. I would also hope that if the perspective is that when you're done with the boring stuff, you get to work on the fun stuff, that you then want to get the boring stuff over with quicker so that you can get around to the fun stuff. At least that's how I work, right? If I know that when I'm done with importing the accounts into our finance sheet, I can then work on designs, or I can have a strategy discussion or something like that. And I'm more likely to get that done rather than to just let it drag on.
I know that for me, it also plays into my own internal motivation. I'm a lot more invested to get even the boring work done or do boring work for a business if I'm getting out of it more than just money. If I'm getting out of it also a more enjoyable environment. I'm invested to keep the company running because I would like to keep working here. Ensuring that that's a driving principle for people in the business, I think is for me what drives me to do the boring work more than it does then I get to do the fun work. For me, it's more that that boring work isn't actually as boring or as mind numbing or as pointless because it's work that needs to get done for this company to keep moving. And so I'm fine with it because I can't get the other things without that part.
Yeah. And one of the ideas being that pretty much nothing is set in stone is that if we end up wasting a lot of time on useless stuff, that hopefully the person who's doing the useless stuff feels enough agency to say, I think this is useless. Can we automate it, get rid of it, reduce the workload of it? I fundamentally believe that's part of the experiment, right? Is that if you give that type of agency and investment and autonomy to people, it will pay dividends more than if you try and control them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fundamental belief that lies under this. And this is just an ongoing experiment to prove that that's right or not.
I think that's a good way of summing it up and also plays into that ability to experiment and learn. Someone who has more autonomy in their role, even if it's something like myself, admin work that doesn't have much of the enjoyment factor, I have the ability to make changes within my work so that my work can be better for me. And I don't need to just work on things just because it's the way that it was done before, or just the way that makes sense to the company. As long as I get my work done, the way that I go about it can be chosen by me to an extent, of course.
Yeah. And I think the pushback I give in general is only when I feel like too much time is spent on this kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
rather than, I don't think I've ever called you out on cutting corners, right?
I think that for me, that's not my lacking side.
No,
My,
no,
my
no, yeah.
yeah. And kind of like you spoke up before, having that maturity to understand when to be professional, when to be more fun or people oriented. I think part of that is that everyone's coming in with different, where does that lie? And so we're more all trying to align and figure out where that lies with the company so we can marry to that. Because I come from a background that is way more, the professional side is the only side that matters. And so I'm often going to jeopardize fun and take out fun because I'm going to see it as less valuable. But if I continue to do that, I'm not aligning with the company. That also plays back into the importance of strategy. The importance of strategy for me is to make sure that it doesn't matter how great my ideas are, if they're leading us continuously down just only professional, but making sure that I'm staying aligned with when to be professional and when to be more fun, or where does that balance lie with the company.
Yeah, and choice of words is important, and I tend to potentially overvalue that kind of stuff, but I'm not sure professional is the word that I would use because I think we are professional. The thing is that if you look at IQM in the last, let's say 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, we've relatively consistently sacrificed fun for profit. And the reason why we've done that is because 5 years ago, when I joined, IQM had 5 or 6 customers. One product was the main source of revenue. There were 2 other products that brought in a little bit of money, but the main source of revenue was one product with a few customers. So we didn't have all of our eggs in one basket, but lots of eggs were in one basket. It was quite high risk. In order for us to be able to continue maintaining the playground, right, to avoid it just collapsing and falling into disrepair, we need, from my perspective, to get to a level of inertia where one big wave isn't going to sink us, to switch metaphors from a playground to a boat. And so adding a 4th product to our product line, cementing our collaboration with a number of our customers, widening our customer portfolio and all that stuff, all plays a part in making the ship more stable. And so I'm hopeful that next year, probably towards the end of next year, once we've gone through the implementation and the first release cycles of Olympus, which are still going to be a little bit more intense, that we will then be at a revenue level where we have way less worries, and a team size where if somebody is sick or if somebody takes a month off on holiday, it doesn't immediately cause us huge issues. And we have a bit of breathing room in the roadmap where we can then start talking about fun and that kind of stuff again. But that wouldn't be possible if we hadn't invested now into something that's going to stabilize us as a business. And so I think potentially we need to make sure that those kind of decisions are clear to the team that they're a long-term play that is still aligned with those values, rather than being sort of the rule, because actually you've been with the business for a year or a year and a half or whatever, like Boyan going on 2 years, and actually this is the only thing you've seen. And so, we're talking about fun, but I haven't seen fun. So actually, I'm calling bullshit. I think that's something important to keep in mind. When I say to Stuart that it's okay for him to miss a gaming session, that's a hard decision that hurts me. I don't think that comes through to the team, because it does happen every now and then, because we're in this phase where actually we're riding a wave, which is going to bring us to a point where we're more stable and more sustainable as a business. But as soon as we're there, then we're going to make sure that we're at least stabilizing, potentially compensating for the time. Because I know how much strain it's put on Stuart, how much strain it's put on me, how much strain it's put on the whole business to be in the position that we're in. And I don't want to just keep going. I want to have a point, like I said, hopefully next year, where we can take the foot off the gas and we can just be like, well, what do you want to do? It's an empty sprint. What do you want to do? Just want to chill, play some games? Because we've had some really intense times, and we still have some really intense times ahead for the next 6 months. So that needs to definitely be balanced out.
Playing into that, but also going back to what I was saying before, is that how are we running things, and why are we making the decisions we're making, and spoke about making it more explicit to the team, maybe about how much something impacts or doesn't impact you or the company at large, saying, hey, we're making these decisions to, instead of just saying, hey, we're not going to have a team meetup because it just doesn't work right now. We're saying, this is really against our principles that we're not doing this. It's really against what we're wanting to do, but we're doing it because of these reasons, and we have to take ownership over the fact that we are in this position and we have to make different choices right now, but this isn't a normal decision for us. And making that more explicit to the team so they know and don't think, oh, it's pretty normal for us to just skip those things, or that's a decision we are okay making. But more also on a personal team members level, ensuring that people in their own domains or in their own roles, if we're using me as an example, aren't spending so much time just like cleaning the equipment continuously over and over again, because it always could be cleaner, instead of actually having fun or understanding the larger goals of the company. Those are two different levels, of one being the more overarching, we make it more visible, we say it more, and also how do we teach the individuals to align with that, whether or not we're following it perfectly, because we have the real world also have to deal with, which influences how much we can align with it.
Okay, cool. I'm definitely going to take some notes from this and put some time into to process this in the coming weeks and try and turn it into something that we can start measuring or start talking about a little bit more concretely. Any closing thoughts or questions?
I definitely will be thinking about this more as well. And I'll be trying to think of it more practically towards myself, because you're my go-to person for understanding how the company works. And I know that we've put some things in place to help with that, like our weekly meetings. I think some of the wording I used today is helping me understand how in our discussions weekly, can we make sure that I'm staying aligned with those principles, whether it means we talk about more explicitly, or helping me understand the importance of, are we needing to repair things right now, or are we needing to build things, or are we needing to play for people individually, but also then for the company?
Awesome. I don't have an immediate follow-up subject for us to tackle next week, but we'll see what we feel like.
Yep.
Take it from there.
Thank you for taking this time to speak with me on this. I feel like I have a better understanding of the company, and also how to speak with you about aligning and voicing what I need when I'm feeling unsure about different decisions or where we're headed.
Great. Thank you for having these discussions. It helps. Well, first of all, it helps me to actually carve out some time to think about these things and talk about them. And then, yeah, hopefully we'll be able to keep going in the direction that we want to go as a business. That's the goal.